This is Randy Sullivan, the host of Bourbon Real Talk. I grew up in a small town and went to a small church where everyone looked and thought like me. Over the years, I've gotten to know and love people from all different walks of life. This has made my world bigger and richer. The secret ingredient in forming those relationships was getting to know people's real stories. That helped me to identify with them, have compassion on them, and eventually develop a real connection with them. We live in a disconnected world today, and I want to do everything in my power to build connections between individuals who may not have attempted friendship otherwise. I've observed this happening in the bourbon community on its own because whiskey naturally brings people together. Bourbon Real Talk hopes to combine the world's new passion for bourbon into an opportunity to bring people together. We will share some whiskey knowledge, some good drams, and some real talk. So sit back, pour a drink, and open your hearts and minds. You might just find yourself feeling more connected to the people in the world around you, all fueled by bourbon. Hello, everybody out there in Bourbon Real Talk land. Randy Sullivan here for a very special edition of Bourbon Real Talk. Get ready to geek out if you are a whiskey nerd. And if you're not a whiskey nerd, get ready to learn a whole lot of information about how the liquor industry works in the state of Texas. And I think that we're going to have some pretty practical advice for you. We have some very special guests today. We have the Golladays. Am I saying that right?
You are.
You got it, man.
Thank you for saying it right.
Yeah. We had a debate. I was telling somebody that I was having you on, and they were like, "It's Gallas," and I was like, "I think it's Golladays." But yeah, so the Golladays run a Facebook group called Texas Whiskey Life, and you guys have been promoting. Are you involved in the Texas Whiskey Trail, or are you just advocates for it?
We've helped out here and there with events and a few other things with the Texas Whiskey Association, Texas Whiskey Trailer. We're good friends with Spencer Whelan, but no, we decided to start this as sort of a community resource.
Mm-hmm.
So we have plans to put a website up at texaswhiskey.life. It's gonna, maybe by the time this comes out, we'll have something there, but
Awesome.
Nothing there currently. We just have the domain. Just to have things like information about new releases from distilleries, interviews with people in the industry, distillers, things like that. Probably a calendar of events that are going on, because if you're involved in the Texas whiskey scene, there's always something, isn't there? There's always like an anniversary party, a special release coming out. Every weekend there's something to do. So we wanted to kind of help provide for all of these people that are involved in the Texas whiskey community, just give them a kind of a cool resource, a place to go, right?
Right.
The story of Texas whiskey, as we've been going out and going to the distilleries and getting to know the distillers and the owners, there's so much history and so many untold stories, especially when you've had a couple drinks, that we really want to be able to kind of share those with the community, because there's so many wonderful stories throughout Texas.
Absolutely.
So we have an amazing history.
Well, and it's not only that. What I've discovered is you can take somebody who, and I've gotten myself in trouble in the whiskey community because I did the Truth About Texas Whiskey piece, and it went along with a huge blind sample test that I sent out.
Right.
When I published the results, there were a lot of whiskey drinkers that are traditionally drinking Kentucky whiskeys and Maryland style ryes that, they didn't like the way that I characterized the results, which I understand. But I think that there is a natural aversion to Texas whiskey that's starting to shift. And one of the things that I've seen that causes it to shift quickly is actually going out to the distillery and meeting these people that are really risking their whole lives for a passion, and for me, when I meet somebody who's driven by passion, that endears me to them.
Completely agree. Yeah.
Makes me more open to it.
I think there's so much, in the whiskey world in general, no matter if you're talking about Texas, you're talking about Kentucky, you're talking about Scotland, Ireland, people like to think that they just purely the quality of the whiskey in the bottle and how that tastes is all they care about. But really, I think for most people, a big compelling part of it is the story, right?
Yeah, I mean, I used to collect wine, and I used to do full research on the winery and its entire history before I'd open the bottle because I found that I enjoyed it more. So,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
there is something to that, and I think that that's starting to shift. But one of the most important things that Texas distilleries can do is get people to come visit their facility and hear their story and see their passion.
Absolutely.
Which you and I both had the opportunity to do that, and that was part of the impetus for me wanting to do this recording. Because I found some things out that were shocking to me about the legal environment that these companies are operating in. Also, before we move too far past that, due to your close relationship with some of the Texas whiskey distilleries, I understand that you guys have recently signed on as contractors to rep for one of the whiskey brands. Is that true?
That's right, for Iron Root Republic. So in the kind of Austin, going towards San Antonio area, and we both have day jobs and everything, but we love the Licorice family. Those guys have been awesome to us, and we've been more than willing to help them out. So we've been taken on as sort of night, weekend, part-time reps for them. So to go and visit bars and restaurants, do in-store tastings, all that kind of stuff to help them kind of get a little more exposure in the Austin area.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's awesome. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about is what they call on-premise. But before we go any further, got to stick with the normal show format. We're going to start drinking some whiskey because this is a drink show. Since I couldn't decide if I wanted to wear my Balcony shirt or my Iron Root shirt. I didn't know at the time that you guys had signed up as reps. So you got like the official.
I have like the official, I guess official.
You can't buy these.
You can't buy
those. Yeah.
You have to send a shirt to Marsha, and Marsha takes care of you.
Yeah. So you're repping Iron Root. You're repping the Texas Whiskey Trail. I'm repping my Balcony shirt that I got when I went there for a barrel pick.
I have two of those shirts.
So to keep it fair, I'm going to drink Lone Elm.
Okay. Fair enough. Since it's Bourbon Real Talk, I'll go with the Garrison Brothers.
Nice. I interviewed Donis Todd a few weeks ago, and
he's awesome.
Yeah, he really blew my mind with some nerddom. So that was good.
And I'm going to defend the ladies at Garrison. There are some amazing ladies at Garrison. They actually brought the Bourbon Women's Group to Austin. And I know I'm looking up their names because
Hope
I'm
Parkerson
terrible.
was one of them.
Yeah. Parkerson, sorry, and Samantha Olive. I can't say Samantha's last name. So Hope and Parker, Hope and Sam, sorry.
So on this Lone Elm, on the nose, I always get like a chocolate covered raisin with a lot of cinnamon on this. And some of the barrels, because they've got some stuff that's been aging for almost 6 years now, some of the barrels have a leather machine oil component from exposure to oxygen. It's a hint of dusty flavor, you know? And I've had a few people that tasted that it just really blew their minds. On the palate, I get a lot of fig, and I get a lot of molasses flavor. This is Randy Sullivan with the Randall Sullivan Home Selling Team and the host of Bourbon Real Talk. Producing a podcast is time-consuming and expensive, and Bourbon Real Talk wants to maintain its integrity by not promoting products and services that it doesn't believe in. For this reason, I've opted to have my real estate team sponsor this program. The Randall Sullivan Home Selling Team has operated since 2008. We've sold almost 500 homes. We have proprietary programs that make a massive difference to the outcome of our clients, and we service the entire North Texas area. If you live in North Texas and you need to buy or sell a home, please give us a chance to explain how our services could benefit you. We understand that not all of our listeners live in North Texas. We also know that not all real estate agents are created equal. If you need a real estate agent outside of North Texas, the Randall Sullivan Home Selling Team has access to tools to help you find a highly qualified agent in your area. The service is free for you, and we stick around through the end of the process to help you with your transaction, even when we're not your agent. If you have a real estate transaction in your future, please reach out to us at randallsullivanteam.com, Facebook, Instagram, or just give us a call at 214 385-9101. So let's talk about the history of Texas whiskey. I apologize to all of your listeners. I'm the one that called the consultant to get all of the detailed nerd knowledge. So if I talk too much, I'm trying to get the terms and stuff out there. We're going to try and make it so I don't talk the whole time because I am kind of a loudmouth. So reach out to Mark Schilling. Thank you so much, Mark, for taking the time. Robert over at Iron Root introduced me, and he knew I was doing this podcast, so he set me up with the right person to talk to. And so let's start off with kind of the general overview, and then we'll get into some details.
Sure.
So there were no legal spirits producers in the state of Texas after Prohibition until Tito's Vodka opened up in around 95, 96.
Right.
And when Tito's Vodka applied for a permit to open up a spirits company, the TABC said that it wasn't legal. They didn't even know that there were laws on the books that allowed a company to get licensed. TABC didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And so they had to go through the process of educating the TABC about what their own laws were so that they could finally apply to get a permit. And that was the first, legal spirits producer. The whiskey industry started about 10 years ago when Dan Garrison and with Garrison Brothers and Balcones was started, Jared Hempstead and Chip Tate, I believe. And so they started at about the same time. And my understanding is Garrison Brothers started first, but Balcones was the first to market or something. So there could be a debate about who was first. But let's talk about that process. So when you want to become a whiskey producer in the state of Texas, you have to have your facility already secured. And so you either have to own a building or you have to lease a building. You have to have your equipment in place. So you have to buy your still, you have to have all of your equipment, everything all set up. And then after you've invested those millions of dollars and you've signed that great big lease, then you're allowed to go to the state of Texas and apply for a permit to determine whether or not they're going to let you use all the stuff that you just paid for.
Right. And they can say yes or no.
Right.
Yeah.
And the truth is they typically don't say no, but what often happens is they say you are not compliant yet. So fix these things and then get back with us. And a process that should take 2 to 3 months might end up taking a year or more.
Right.
And a lot of companies go out of business during that phase of the process. They never get to fire up the still.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so think about that. Like if you were going to start a alcohol related business in the state of Texas, you'd literally have to be insane to decide to start a whiskey company 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's a business model that doesn't really make any sense.
It's not proven out, right? You've got to invest potentially you have to commit to millions of dollars worth of capital expenditure before you even know whether or not you're going to get a license. That's crazy to me.
Right.
What's interesting here, so we live in Austin and so we have the Hill Country. There's a number of distilleries in the Hill Country. And one thing when we have gotten to know Ty Phelps over the years, who runs Andalusia and used to work for Real Ale, and I think did some things for Treaty Oak. He was telling us about how cumbersome, I guess, the laws are in Travis County, which is where Austin proper is. So there is a reason that Still Austin is the only distillery in the Travis County limits. And Josh can probably tell you more about that because we've talked to them and for them to tell us the hoops that they had to jump through, and every time that they thought they were compliant, they would get one more thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you're close in the city limits, it's a whole different animal. But I mean, just starting a distillery in general, there's such a startup cost to that. There's such a time delay to where you're able to even get your product on the market. I mean, that's, you have people either sourcing product or producing unaged spirits, all of those kinds of things to try and bring in cash flow at that time. But if you're a whiskey producer in particular, even in Texas where something's going to take on average 2 to 3 years before you put it in the bottle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Roughly. That's a long time to sit on a bunch of inventory, basically, right?
Sure. Yeah, that's a business model I would not want to face.
Exactly.
So one of the things that I hope people get out of this is, one, we want to help you understand how the whiskey that you're purchasing and drinking gets into your hands, and what are the battles that producer had to face. But also, I want people to, even if you don't like Texas whiskey, which is okay, it's not for everyone, but even if you don't like it, I feel like you should at least respect the sacrifice and the commitment that these people made and the environment in which they made it. It's safer to do it today than it was 10 years ago when Dan Garrison and Jared Hempstead were deciding to do it, right?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was a complete unknown. And they were starting in an environment where you didn't know what there was no body to follow their lead in Texas, right? So you didn't know what still to buy. You didn't know what grains to use. You didn't know what distillation proof to go to. You didn't know what type of barrels to use, what char level. Should they be toasted? Should it be 30 gallons or 53 or 60, like the wine industry, or what not? You didn't know how long to age your product. You didn't know if you were going to be able to get a distributor to pick your product up. You didn't know any of these things, right? And they had to use a lot of trial and error to get to the point that we're at today, and risk millions and millions of dollars worth of capital. And then somebody comes along that's just used to tasting Kentucky bourbon and goes, this stuff is hot garbage.
Yeah, exactly. This is terrible and it's too expensive and et cetera. And like, I can understand if you're not really thinking about all of those elements, where somebody comes and says, why am I going to pay 50, 60, whatever dollars for this bottle when this other thing from Kentucky's half the price and I like it better anyway? And I can understand that, but it speaks to exactly what you're saying there, is you have to respect at least the amount of like sort of brave risks these people took, right?
Sure.
In really uncertainty that they had to deal with. What you were talking about, all the different choices, you don't know how to make whiskey here, really, right? Mm-hmm. Figuring out what kind of whiskey this place wants to make is really, I feel like, only being figured out in the last few years to really, improve the quality from what it was from the start, right?
And we have 5 different climate zones in Texas. So depending on where you are in the state of Texas, what Iron Root is doing with their process is different than what, Gulf Coast, MKT, San Antonio, anybody in the Hill Country is doing, even Waco. I mean, even us, Waco being an hour and a half from Austin, they're doing so many different things than what we're doing in the Hill Country. So.
Sure.
Yeah. It really speaks, I think, to the progress and innovation and stuff that these distillers have made happen over the years. I've seen folks on the, people like you have someone say Whiskey Club. There's a bunch of other clubs in different cities that have Facebook groups and all that. And I'm used to seeing a lot of any Texas whiskey is hot garbage. I'll never buy it, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's starting to shift. I've seen people who I know were Texas whiskey detractors, right? Finally tasting something from the last year or two and going, oh, this is actually much better than what I remembered.
Sure.
From when I tried, Balcones, Garrison Brothers, whatever, from 5 years ago, 6 years ago, further back, I think that improvements have been made that are monumental. People like Iron Root in particular, there's a lot of folks when you're starting a distillery, what's one way to get a lot of, I don't want to say age it faster, because age always happens at the same rate, but to get a lot of color and flavor into the whiskey real quickly is to use small barrels, right?
Mm-hmm.
You use small barrels and age that in the heat, and it takes on a ton of wood flavor, wood extraction really quickly. And a lot of these guys are now moving away from that. And now that they have a little bit of breathing room to do this, they're using larger and larger casks. I mean, Iron Root just went to 63 gallon barrels, all in an effort to slow that process of whiskey maturation down.
Sure.
Where they didn't have that luxury at first, right?
Sure. Right. Well, and they didn't know whether or not it was necessary.
Right. Maybe this is what works here, and then they figured out, well, maybe sometimes the small barrel maturation works for certain types of whiskey, but in general, you're going to want to not rush that process as much as you can because it happens very quickly here.
Right. Yeah, and the truth about Texas whiskey, I talk about the extra staves they use at balconies to increase the oxidization rate because they can't leave it in barrel as long as they would like to get the oxidization up. So they've got to speed the process up. So I don't want to go too deep into the manufacturing methods because I've already done a podcast on that. But moving towards the sales and distribution side, on September 1st, there's some laws that are changing. And we were at a dinner. It was all, very actively involved whiskey community members. And somebody asked, what does this law mean? What is this going to change? And I found out that what was going to change is brand reps like you guys are now were previously prohibited from going into what they call an on-premise and repping the brand unless the distributor was there.
Right.
And I was like, what? That doesn't are you kidding me? And so that's what got me into, looking into what is this environment? So let's talk a little bit about terms. So there is the company that makes the whiskey. I think that the legal term is supplier. A lot of people use the term producer. So as you and I talk, we're going to use those terms interchangeably, supplier and producer.
Right.
So that includes, non-distiller producers, NDPs. That includes, actual distilleries that only sell their own product. That includes companies like Ben Milam that are using some of their own distillate mixed with source distillate that's pre-aged, things like that. So that covers everybody. Those are kind of the brands. And then the next level, everybody uses the term distributor, and we will probably use that term distributor because it's in the vernacular. But Mark Schilling pointed out to me that in the code, a distributor only distributes beer and wine, and that a company that is responsible for selling spirits is considered a wholesaler. And so that term distributor and wholesaler are kind of interchangeable in the vernacular. And then you've got your retailer, which is the liquor stores. That's pretty straightforward. And then some liquor stores have what's called a Class B license. That Class B license allows them to sell to on-premise accounts, which are bars and restaurants. Right. And so those are our 4 tiers: supplier / producer, distributor / wholesaler, retailer, on-premise. So that's the environment that's how whiskey makes it from the person who's manufactured it into the consumer's hands, right? And there are rules that govern at each one of those steps. And so are you guys excited about the change? Because on September 1st, you're now going to be able to go to on-premise without the distributor present. So
yeah,
that's actually new for us because we originally started out. We've been friends with the licorice family for a little bit now, and we said, hey, how can we don't see you very much in Austin. There's a presence in Total Wine, but how do we get you guys to be more prevalent in Austin? What can we do? I mean, Josh and I love to host whiskey tastings. Can we hold a whiskey tasting in your house? What do we need to do? And they said, well, here's this opportunity starting September 1st. So
right. Yeah, and it seems like if you're the producer, you should be able to go and market your brand, even though, the distributor helps you connect to retailers and get your product to where it needs to go and all that kind of stuff. It seems like you should be fairly free to go and represent and try and sell your brand, without having to be held back by too many restrictions, right? And I see it as a very good thing.
Right. So if you look at each one of the tiers in our 4-tier system, you've got the producer. The producer was able to market their product to distributors. The producer was, and some people didn't know this apparently, but the producer was able to market their product to retailers without the distributor present.
Right.
But they were not allowed to market their product to bars and restaurants.
Right.
And until I think 2011, they were not allowed to market to consumers even at their own facility. So when Dan Garrison and Jared decided to start their distilleries, Dan tells this hilarious story about a TABC rep coming out to look at the distillery and grabbed a White Dog sample that came off the still, and Dan said, "Don't drink that."
Yeah.
Right.
That's illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And the TABC rep didn't even know. So they had to fight to have the right to give away free samples at their distillery.
Mm-hmm.
And so until I think he was unsure if it was 2011 or 13, but he thought it was 2011 was when they were first able to give away free samples. Right.
Right.
So imagine that you invest, $5 million or whatever it is into your distillery, and you're not even allowed to let your inline customer taste it, even if you give it away.
Even when you're on a tour, because how many tours have you been on where part of the process,
Right.
and Garrison is actually a great example of that, because their tour is probably one of the most amazing ones we've been to be able to sample that White Dog, to be able to taste a little bit of that mash. Can you imagine going on this, hour and a half long tour and you're like, okay, what, can I taste it? Well, no, you have to buy a bottle at the gift shop. Have a nice day.
Right.
And
and it actually, that was just the first stage. The first stage was to give away samples. It took 2 more years before they passed a law that they were allowed to sell product direct to consumers.
Right. In a tasting room. Right.
In a tasting room. And the rule is you can sell 1,500 milliliters to each individual that every 30 days. So it's not based on a calendar year. And only 3,500 gallons can be sold through your distillery per year. Right?
Yep, exactly.
And so that is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's amazing what kind of transformation has happened, being able to give away the free samples and then being able to have a tasting room in which people want to come and visit and see where this product is made and hear the stories of the people who make it. And that's a thing now, right? That you go to a place like Iron Root, Balcones, Garrison Brothers, all of these distilleries, and of course you're going to want to sample everything and take a tour and but to be able to only purchase essentially 2 bottles. I mean, it depends on the size of the bottle, but to be able to only purchase essentially 2 bottles, that's not a big problem. I mean, we can drive back out there in a month and go pick up something. But if you think about people coming into the state for tourism and they want to visit these distilleries and pick up different products, I see people all the time that are interested and they'll ask us, where do we need to go? What do we need to try? If I bring back bottles of something, what do I need to bring back? Because I don't get Balcones where I'm at. I don't get Iron Root where I'm at. And I'll say, well, when you go there, you're only going to be able to get 2. So you should pick this one, and you're not going to be able to get anything else.
And don't go on a Sunday.
But
so you can go to a winery or a brewery on a Sunday, no problem. But you can't go to a distillery on a Sunday.
Right. And buy product. Yeah.
You can't do bottle sales. And so, that's part of the tourism industry. If you're going to come to Texas, I mean, that's a huge state. You're not going to say, okay, well, I'm going to leave on Sunday morning. You're going to want to finish out your trip, and you can't buy a bottle.
So it makes me feel like, why would you want tourism coming to your state that's then restricted in the kind of local products that they can buy?
Well, and what about a brand like Balcones? What they had like over 20 cola approvals last year or something like that.
So many bottles.
Right. They had so many bottles. Like you should limit 2 per label or something, right? Yeah. Like don't, I mean, even Iron Root, they have more than 2 product lines.
Right.
What if you just wanted 1 bottle of each or 2 bottles of each, So you're hamstringing an industry that quite honestly provides an awful lot of tax revenue to the state. And there's a reason why they're hamstrung, and it's because of the four-tier system that we have. So what you need to understand as a consumer is that these distributors, and there are a lot of distributors that are out there, but there's really only two big distributors, right? Which is Republic and Glazers.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked with reps from both companies, and they have tons of submissions that they turn down, right? And so these brands have more, or these distributors / wholesalers have more brands coming to them, asking them, pick up my product, promote my product, sell my product, than they have capacity for, right? And this is something that I had never thought of before. A couple of years ago, liquor stores started hiding the good whiskey in the back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you had to go in and you had to say, not the good whiskey, but anything that was like rare or sought after.
Yeah, the sought after whiskey.
And I thought that it was to protect the store from having a consumer come in and buy it all. But it's actually not.
Right.
It's actually, have you ever gone into a liquor store and there were just tons of open spaces on the shelves?
Yeah.
No,
Yep.
That's not a thing that happens, because every store that has shelving has to make a certain amount of money per square foot in that store. And so they have to have product on the shelves. And they can't afford to shelf a product that's going to sell in 2 hours and not come back in for another 3 months, 6 months, or a year.
Right.
And so anything that they know is going to sell quickly and they don't know when they're going to get another shipment of it, they put it in the back just so that they don't waste shelf space.
Sure.
Right. And that's something that consumers need to understand. They're not trying to hide the whiskey from you. They're trying to keep their shelves full of brands that have a chance of being picked up by a customer if they walk into the store. And even though the shelves are full, there's a lot of brands that aren't represented.
Right.
And that fact is going to become significant when we get down to the end of this and I start talking about what changes I think would help the industry. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so you've got the producer, they have to contract with the supplier, they have to apply, they have to sometimes beg to get the supplier or the distributor / wholesaler to pick them up. And then the distributor has reps that focus on usually either liquor stores or on-premise accounts.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so they go out and they go, hey, we've got this new product. They'll bring samples. They say, hey, try this, to the liquor store owner or manager or the bar owner or manager, and say, hey, we think that you should carry this product. But they can't do that for everybody who wants it. And they can't even do it for everybody that they've agreed to do it for. Right. Not effectively.
Yeah,
right?
There's just not enough space and not enough willingness probably on the part of the retailers or the on-premise people to take on everything that's thrown at them.
We actually had an interesting kind of situation. So 7 Grand loves them. They're one of the, in our opinion, one of the best whiskey bars in Austin downtown. And we've been going there for a while, and we said, hey, out of curiosity, how come you don't have Andalusia on the shelf? How come you don't have Iron Root on the shelf? There's Balcones. I think they have 2 Garrisons on the shelf. They have 1 Treaty Oak. Where are the other local brands? How come we don't see them? How come Lone Elm's not here? And they said, well, we'd love to have them, but we need to have the distributor come in and like talk to our general manager and our bar manager. And there's like this whole system. And I was like, but Jake Clements from the Texas Whiskey Festival hosts, Texas Whiskey Night every Tuesday. And they're like, well, we know, but we're trying.
Yeah, so, it's a whole thing to bring it in here. Yeah. Exactly.
And I think it wound up taking 2 or 3 months to see the first Iron Root on the shelf.
You finally did.
Yeah, finally did. And we were trying to help out Ty from Andalusia. He's like, gosh, I talked to him last February, and I'm like, well, let's talk to him again. Let's join forces and see what we can. So.
Yeah. And then, these guys get all kinds of, everybody wants their product in
Mm-hmm.
there. You know, they get all kinds of stuff thrown at them all the time, and they have to pick and choose what's going to sell, right? How much shelf space they have available, all those kinds of things. So, I mean, it's always great when you have a place like 7 Gram that's willing to sort of take a chance, if you will, right?
And they want to actually be a Texas whiskey bar. I know the Texas Whiskey Association, Texas Whiskey Trail are talking to them about being, you know, kind of like a bar, so to speak, that represents Texas whiskey.
Yeah, where the staff is well trained and informed. And
they know how to pour it. They know
Mm-hmm.
they know the stories behind it. So,
yeah, I mean, I actually talked to two of the managers from a local bar here, and Ben Milam was there. Their distributor was there. They didn't break the law. The distributor was there, and they said that it took, I think, 2 months after the bar made the decision that they wanted to carry the Ben Milam product. It took 2 months to get it in.
Yeah.
It wasn't that the distributor didn't have the inventory.
Right.
It was that the distributor has to sell it to the retailer with the Class B, and then the retailer with the Class B has to sell it to the bar or restaurant and get it shipped out there. And there's all this inefficiency in the system, and each stage is trying to protect their monopoly. Right. Because the distributors, every time somebody proposes a change, the distributors fight it. Right. Every time someone proposes a change, the retailers fight it. And they are way more powerful than the spirits production industry in Texas right now.
Of course, yeah.
Because the spirits producers, and a lot of people don't know this, none of the big Texas whiskey brands that you guys know of are profitable.
Yeah. I think that's something that people don't realize, and you find those stories when you're able to sit down with people. And, you know, we were fortunate to have a tour of Garrison Brothers when we were actually out with the Texas Whiskey Trail about a month ago, and have the tour done by Dan himself, and to hear Dan's story from where his interest was until today, I was shocked to hear some of the information. And he said, you know, especially as big as Garrison is and how beautiful of a property is, just, you know, that fact that there's not the profits, you know.
Yeah.
They're still literally losing money. They've had one profitable year in all of their years of operation. And I was talking with the Licorice family, and he said that they expected to turn their first profit this year. I'm not going to tell you how much it is, but it is not enough to pay a secretary's salary. I'll tell you that. So, you know, these brands that, and I think consumers get this idea that, oh, their product is so expensive, they're greedy. No, they're still losing money. Right?
They don't see very much of that cost. And I think that's what has empowered Josh and I to be such strong advocates for the Texas whiskey industry and all the distillers that we meet, because just that fact, like, you know, these are just people that are like you and me. I mean, we all have full-time jobs. Like, they're just trying to produce a really amazing spirit and give this kind of gift to the community and the world and the country. But they're not making any money, and so they're toiling away. So what can we do to be part of that and really get that story out there and say, look, they would like to pay their water bill this month?
Yeah. Right. You think about some of these, like the major characters in the Texas whiskey industry. I've heard Dan Garrison give impassioned speeches about how great bourbon whiskey can change the world. And I've listened to Ty Phelps tell all kinds of stories about getting, you know, having previous experience at other companies, and then with a dream to make malt whiskey out there in Andalusia, and you know, the Licorice family, you know, they getting inspired to start a distillery, realizing how terrifying and how much sense it doesn't make
the guys
to get into that business.
And the guys at Still Austin, I mean,
and yet they do it anyway.
Yeah, and the guys at Still Austin, I mean, they have that huge column still, and to hear their story, and when we sat down with them and said, hey, what is the story behind Still Austin? They're like, well, my dad likes bourbon and whiskey spirits, and I really wanted to have something to bond with him over.
Yeah.
What? You know,
they do it because they care. They do it because they care. They do it as a passion. Yeah. It's, you know,
it's a passion project.
A lot of these guys, I almost think about them as on the same level as artists, right?
Right,
I mean,
sure.
who else is trying? I mean, Jared Hemstedt cares about blue corn that's grown within the state, you know,
Right.
and Iron Root cares about using heirloom corn varieties for special flavors that nobody else is really using out there. And the same goes, I think, for any craft whiskey distillery in other states as well. So I'm sure the details are different, but it's really, really difficult to make a high quality product, do creative, interesting, different things that isn't already dominated by other companies in the space, right? You're not going to out Buffalo Trace in Texas, right? You're going to do something different. And all the while doing it on what's almost impossible to be profitable, right?
Sure.
At least in the short term. So it always frustrates me a little bit when people look at that and say, oh, that's different, that's trash and too expensive. I don't have time for it.
And I think another thing we look at too is, I know Balcones is I don't know what the stats for Balcones, but I know a lot of what they are producing, a lot of the grains and a lot of the corns and things that they're using are from local farmers in Texas, and they ship it in once it's all distilled. They actually give back the product to feed the cattle from the farms. I was watching an interview with Robert Licorice the other day, and he said, I think it was like 95% of what goes into Iron Root is grown within 60 miles of the distillery. So it's an industry that's not being selfish. It's actually giving back to other industries in the state.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's even, and I don't want to mention it because I might be wrong, there's even one distillery that's capturing their CO2. And so that's not released into the atmosphere. Right. I mean, and that's a very expensive process because they're trying to be good community members, but they're doing it, So there's all of these like weird laws on the Texas books that make it almost impossible to make money. So one of the laws that I found out about, and I don't know if this one's changed yet or not, is a lot of distilleries, when they start, they will make a gin that is, unaged so that they can sell something and start making money to pay the bills.
Exactly.
They'll make a vodka, they'll make some sort of a, blended something. And to do that, they have to buy grain neutral spirit. By the way, I've switched over to the Balcones Rumble.
Ooh, that's nice. One of my favorites.
I have a Andalusia Revenant Oak tawny port barrel finish.
Nice. So Alex Elrod and Thomas Moat, this is proof how much I love your product, and I want to get I want to get a single barrel selection of this. So moving on, I found out that some of the Texas whiskey producers were able to distill grain neutral spirit, and it was a great way for them to pay for their still, is to run it and produce grain neutral spirit either for their own use, but also if they had excess capacity, sell to other local or statewide distilleries. It was illegal. It was perfectly legal for a producer to buy grain neutral spirit. It was illegal to buy it from a producer inside the state of Texas.
Which is absolutely maddening.
Maddening, right? And so it's like, how many different ways are you going to handcuff these people and make it impossible for them to function, right?
Right.
They can't give away free samples. They can't sell any product. They can't. And some of those things have changed. The free samples have changed. The selling the bottles has changed. I think that the GNS issues changed. But there are some other rules that are still in place that are just insane, right? So they're changing the rule about the producer being able to talk to the on-premise accounts. Mm-hmm. There's still a rule that the distributor cannot sell product to a bar or a restaurant. So the distributor, wholesaler can't sell to an on-premise account.
Right.
And that's a huge problem, because if you guys slay the dragon and you get out there and you get all these on-premise accounts that want to start carrying the product, and real quick side note, why is on-premise carrying a product important for a brand?
It's
for exposure, right?
That's going to be the most. It's one thing if you're in the whiskey community, you're a whiskey geek, right? You care about this stuff. You have a collection. Of course, you're going to know about all of the distilleries that are nearby you and what they make and which ones you like and which ones you don't. And you've tried them all, and maybe you've been there, you've gone on the Texas Whiskey Trail. But for the vast majority of people that don't know the difference between malt whiskey or bourbon or anything like that, right? That's where they're going to experience it. That's the first time they'll probably even see that logo or have it made into a cocktail or get the opportunity to just show up and it's, Iron Root night or Balcones night or whatever at a bar and try this stuff for the first time. So it's a massive amount of exposure versus it just being on the shelf on a liquor store, right?
Exactly.
And I think we have to remember that not everybody, wants to kind of pull the trigger and spend, $40, $50, $60 on a bottle. They're not going to know if they like. And so why not be able to go to a bar and try it? Have a Texas whiskey flight. And you may not like it. And you may love every single one of them, or you may love one, but at least you've been exposed to it.
Right. And that's why on-premise is important for brands. And so if we're going to put laws in place that are going to keep on-premise from happening, it's just another hurdle that producers have to get over.
Yeah.
Right.
And so one of the laws that I'd love to see change is I'd love to see where distributors could sell directly to on-premise accounts and not have to wait. And we didn't get into this before, but when I asked why it took so long, once they made the decision to bring in Ben Milam, they said, well, our Class B supplier didn't want to ship the small number of bottles that we wanted to order for our first order while we tested things out in our marketing and see whether or not we can even sell this.
Yeah.
Right.
They wanted to wait.
Case. Yeah.
Right. They wanted to wait until there was a larger order. And then there's this whole issue of inducements, which are illegal. Okay. But they do happen. And inducements are where, let's say that the distributor gets their shipment of allocated bottles from some brand that's super popular, right? I don't want to mention any brands because I'm not trying to call out any one wholesaler, but let's say that there's an allocated whiskey they know there's 1,000 people who want to buy every bottle and they get it. That distributor may decide, I'm not going to ship all of these out to the retailers that have ordered this. I'm going to keep some of this in my inventory. Do you know why? Well, because 6 months from now, when all of this whiskey is long gone, and I've got to go to my retailer and put some pressure on them to order some shitty vodka that's not moving.
Right.
I might be able to go, well, I might be able to dig in the back of our warehouse and find a bottle of XYZ if you'll order 5 cases of this vodka. Right. And so that's what an inducement is. And those things are illegal according to the laws in the state of Texas, but they happen all the time.
It happens all the time. Yeah.
All the time. And a lot of times it's the less experienced distributor reps that are doing that to the liquor stores. And sometimes it's cross-brand, right? So, Wheatley vodka, I've heard, stores are getting some pressure to move Wheatley vodka, which is the Sazerac brand, which also owns Buffalo Trace. So that's all the Van Winkles, that's all the BTACs.
Right.
And so there may or may not be some pressure associated with your allocated bottles at the end of the year. But I've heard stories of the distributor trying to maybe not sell Wheatley vodka, but give an inducement with a Sazerac product to order something that's not even made by Sazerac. Because keep in mind, the distributor's trying to make money.
Right.
And if they've got something that's taken up space in their warehouse that they've got capital tied up in, they really don't care how it gets sold. They just have to sell it. And that's damaging to the brands. Right.
Yeah,
and so Texas distilleries get caught up in that because they're not going to be the focus for the distributor or the retailer, because they're not going to, that stuff's not necessarily going to be sold an hour after it comes into the store.
Right. It's a slower mover. Yeah.
And so you'll have a situation where somebody might want it, but the distributor's like, we'll get around to it. Whenever you make your next order, we'll ship it. We're not going to send it right now. Same thing with the retailer. And then that trickles down to the on-premise accounts. And that's why you might have made the best whiskey in the world. You might have done a good, first off, there should be no brand reps, period. There's no reason for there to be a brand rep if you're going to make the law so that the distributor is the only one that's allowed to market the damn product.
Right.
The fact that brands are hiring reps proves that the system's broken.
Yep, exactly.
Right? And so if you hire a brand rep, they do a good job, they get somebody excited, and they want the product, it doesn't matter. You might have the best product in the world. It doesn't matter. The system is set up to make it hard for the producer.
Right.
Yep, exactly. We did a barrel selection, right?
Oh, yeah.
And found a liquor store in Austin that was willing to carry it. And that was bottled and sent out to the distributor. And it took, 6 weeks?
More than that.
To get to Austin. And then one case was missing and went to completely the wrong store, even though it's marked on the front, like send to this store in Austin. It's written on there in bold letters where it's supposed to go. Not a priority. Didn't care about even getting it to the right place.
Went to Paris, Texas.
Went to Paris, Texas. So I mean, it's set up to be difficult for even the right product to get to the right place.
Right.
Those
mistakes happen all the time.
Yeah. They can't get the right product to the right place. And, the distillery was calling and emailing them to take their time to hassle what should have been a very simple task. Right.
Right. This is Randy Sullivan with RSHST Capital, LLC, and the host of Bourbon Real Talk. Producing a podcast is time-consuming and expensive, and Bourbon Real Talk wants to maintain its integrity by not promoting products or services that it doesn't believe in. For this reason, I have opted to have my funding company sponsor this program. RSHST Capital is the first of its kind funding company that provides pay-at-close funding to home sellers out of their equity. If you have a home to sell, need money for renovations or repairs to maximize your profit, money to stop pending foreclosure or to keep your mortgage current, or cash for really anything, then look into RSHST Capital. This program is simple. We verify that you have equity, approve you for a funding amount. You have access to that cash at practically a moment's notice for only a nominal fee. This program is raising sellers cash after closing by tens of thousands of dollars, stopping foreclosures and changing people's financial future. You pick your real estate agent, your contractor, and have access to actual cash or contracting expenses with zero upfront cost. This is a nationwide program, so if you have any curiosity about how it works, please look us up at rshstcapital.com, Facebook, or just give us a call at 214-385-9101. So, kind of to recap, and then let's talk about some changes. Mm-hmm. You've got the producer who can beg a wholesaler to take them on. Then the wholesaler is supposed to market to the retailer and potentially to on-premise accounts, but the retailer may market to on-premise accounts, but none of that's working for the brand. So they're having to hire brand reps to go out and do all this work, but it was illegal for them to do the work with the on-premise accounts, but now that's changing. So there was a scenario where you could invest millions of dollars, not get your permit when you were supposed to. When you got done, you weren't even allowed to give your product away for free. You weren't sure whether or not somebody was going to pick you up. Once you got picked up, you weren't getting any marketing. If they did do marketing, there may not be shelf space for your product. Right. If there were shelf space for your product, or if you had an on-premise account that wanted it, they may not be willing to ship the product because there's not a large enough order to justify sending out the truck and all of this stuff. So it's just this impossible sales environment for all these people. So what are some changes that, from you guys' perspective, because I have some ideas that you think would make things better for Texas spirits producers?
I think the biggest one from a consumer standpoint is that 750 milliliter rule is just
even if you could
challenging.
get that to 2 bottles per SKU.
Yeah, 2 bottles per SKU. That would be perfect.
That would be, I mean, very rarely is somebody going to visit a distillery and be in love with it enough to go further than that. Right. Right. Like maybe once in a while, but that's pretty reasonable, I think, to say you can have 2 bottles of each, right? Whatever's on offer there.
Sunday sales would be great to treat us like every other, just, the wine industry and the beer industry. I know the beer industry just got a major coup in the last legislative session. So now they can actually sell on-prem at their breweries. They can actually sell other breweries. I think that would be a major coup for us. I know Walmart just lost a lawsuit this week, or was it? I don't know if it was a lawsuit.
Last week, maybe.
Yeah, where they want to be able to sell distilled spirits and whiskeys.
Yeah, in a different retail environment. Right?
And they said, and everybody's, no, you can't do it. But you can go to the liquor store next door, next to Walmart, and get it. But you can't get it in Walmart or
Costco.
Store,
I think was
Costco's rules are very interesting. I started looking into that this week. How their liquor store is not even really affiliated with Costco, and they
totally
just happen to share a building. So I think those are
in other states that works,
right?
And people often have greater access and lower prices, right, to things that in states like, I want to say Arizona, you can go to Costco. I don't know. There are states where you can go to a place like Costco. I know in Michigan you can buy liquor in other retail environments. So
on Sunday too. I don't know how many times I've been in a Total Wine, especially in the Austin area recently, where I always flock just naturally. I go to the Texas whiskey section, which I'm very proud to see that there is one now. We have a Texas whiskey section. We're starting to see a lot more certified Texas whiskey stickers, which is part of the Texas Whiskey Association. But bottles are turned sideways, and you can't see the name of the bottle because
there's not space.
Right, there's not enough space, and I'm just like, well, how does somebody know what that is? And so I've been known to flip a bottle around, or 2, or an entire shelf. Just because, even if it's just one, because I want people to see the brand name. I don't think it's fair that Jack Daniels you can see the front of the face, or something like Rebecca Creek or an Iron Root or a Treaty Oak that's on the shelf. You can't see them.
I have compassion for the business owner that's just trying to remain profitable. I don't have compassion for people trying to maintain an unfair competitive advantage, right?
Exactly.
So there's the reason why they put a limit on bottle sales at distributors or at producers is because distributors were worried that they were going to lose their monopoly, and they fought it, right? And so they compromised and they said 2 bottles per 2 bottles per SKU would be great. In my opinion, there'd be no reason to limit the bottles at the distillery anyway.
Right.
You've already talked about how impossible it is to get a permit to produce spirits inside of a city. No one is going to drive to Garrison Brothers to buy their product when it's on the shelf at Twin Liquors.
Exactly. Right.
It's not going to happen.
No.
So there's too much fear out there and fear mongering by the distributors and the retailers. And the other thing that I hate is the false argument, right? So the argument is we have to have this 3-tier system to protect consumers. One of my favorite things to ask when I'm talking to a distributor rep is, hey, when you get your shipment in from the producer, how many samples do you send to the lab to evaluate the product's safety for public consumption? They go, oh, we don't do that. We don't open the bottle up.
Exactly.
And I go, okay, so when you ship the bottle to the retailer, before they put it on the shelf, how many samples do they send to the lab? None?
0? Yeah.
0? Okay. Then how are you protecting the public? Because they're going to drink the same juice if they bought the bottle at the distillery as they would have if they bought it at the retailer or at the bar, because no one's checking it.
Right.
And I heard someone say, well, the distiller normally tastes the product before they present it to the bars and restaurants. And I'm like, I'm not a heartless asshole. I care as much about the distiller rep dying from drinking bad spirit as I do the random consumer that bought it at a store. Right. The reality is our system for licensing has eliminated most, if not all, of the life-threatening safety risks associated with spirits. Whatever the TABC is doing, it's working. I've not heard of anybody getting sick from drinking a spirit from a licensed producer. So the whole concept that we need all of this separation between the consumer and the producer is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think they need to remove the limit of the bottles that can be sold. And what that's going to do is increase tourism.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
And that's what some of these smaller brands need, is to increase tourism. I think that we need to get rid of the separation between on-premise and the distributor.
Absolutely.
I don't see any reason for a Class B to be in between, because they are too strapped to be able to serve in that role. And that's why it takes so long for the on-premise to get the product that they're ordering, because they're too busy trying to sell some other product to them so that when they send the truck out, they're not wasting money on gas.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let the distributor handle that, in my opinion. And that's very controversial. And I'm sure that there's some, Class B license holders that are going to see this and just be like, what? You don't know what that would do to us. But what I find is that when you start restricting business in preference for one business over another, eventually it ends up unfair for somebody. Mm-hmm. Capitalism works, people, right? And if we got rid of the limit, what I'd really love to see happen? When I went down to Fredericksburg in you guys' area a few weeks ago, I went to a winery, had a beautiful facility, far more money invested than any distillery I've ever gone to in Texas besides Balcones. Mm-hmm. And Balcones' investment is mostly in equipment. Their building is nice, but this place was like amazing, right? It looked like I was at a resort.
Sure.
And I found out that company sells $20 million a year in wine, and they don't have a distributor.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what people don't know is that if you're a spirits producer in Texas, you have to have a distributor. You can't sell product except for the 2 bottles per. That's your only outlet. Wineries, on the other hand, can have you build a beautiful facility that attracts you for tourism. You get there, you try their wines, and they go, hey, sign up for our bottle club membership.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And they will ship the product directly to you for as long as you're willing to be a bottle club member.
Exactly.
And you now have, 10 years ago, before that law changed, there were probably 6 or 7 wineries in the Fredericksburg area. Mm-hmm. Now there's like 30 plus.
Right.
Because people who have capital to invest, it's safe for them to invest because now they have a way to monetize that investment because they can sell direct to consumer. And I don't know if this is always the case, but I've been told that the wholesaler marks up product 30% and the retailer marks up product 30%.
Right.
And so whatever you're paying for that bottle, the producer probably only made about 25% of whatever it was that you paid for it. Somewhere in that range. Maybe not 25, but it maybe somewhere between 25 and 40% of what the actual cost was that you paid. That's what's going back to the producer. Mm-hmm. When you sell direct to consumer, the way that the wineries do, you cut out 60% of the expense. Right. And now your monetization of your effort is at a much higher rate. You can afford to give a discount. I don't think, and they could even make it, in my opinion, just to protect the retailers, that the distilleries were allowed to sell their product direct unlimited and ship their product in a bottle club, and that they weren't allowed to undercut the retailer.
Right. Sure.
I would be okay with that. Right.
Yeah.
So, and most of the suppliers that I've gone to, their bottle cost is usually just above what that same bottle would be in a retail location, because they don't want to piss off the retail stores that are supporting them. But I feel like we should have in-state, legal in-state shipping from spirits producers to consumers in the state. I know once we cross state lines, now we're dealing with federal laws, but if we could just change it so that through tourism. If you live in Austin and you travel up here to visit me and I take you up to meet my friends, the licorice family, and you love their product and you want to sign up for their bottle club and get your product shipped to you in Austin, that should be allowed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And otherwise you're doing a 6.5-hour trip in one day.
Instead, what happens, just last night we were out at Crowded Barrel and somebody asked us, hey, do they still have, at the distillery, do they still have Icarus at Iron Root?
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, I don't know. Let me check. And it doesn't make its way down here. Right. And he's thinking, well, I'm trying to plan a trip up there because I really want to go see those guys, but I really love that whiskey. So if I'm going to make the trip and drive hours out of my way, I'd really like to be able to buy some of that. So now we're like coordinating with Robert to try and figure out where in the world he might be able to go buy a bottle of this, when what you're suggesting here means that he could have just reserved and had it shipped.
Right.
Because he's already...
There are some retailers in some states that will ship.
Right.
It's against federal law, but their state laws don't prohibit it, so they just do it. Right.
In Europe, Amazon ships.
Yeah.
Right.
I think in Canada, you can order off of Amazon and you've get a bottle of liquor Prime. So
exactly.
So another proposed change would be there's a problem with getting capital in the spirits industry in the state of Texas because you'd have to be almost stupid to invest in this environment. I love all of the producers that are out there, but you guys are crazy. And if you're just a consumer, you should really respect the sacrifice that they made to do that.
Yep.
But when they go out to raise capital, they usually start off with their own money and then they go to friends and family. Well, a lot of times there's like a really successful bar owner that they're friends with, or a really successful liquor store owner that they're friends with. Currently, you can only have ownership interest in one tier in the state of Texas.
Right. You can't play.
And so if you own a successful liquor store and you're friends with the licorice family and you want to buy a part of the company, can't do it.
Right.
Right. I think that they should make some changes to that so that you could have ownership, non-controlling interest in multiple tiers. Some people have suggested as little as 5 to 10% ownership would be enough. But I think that it should just be non-controlling interest. I think that would help to bring more capital into the state of Texas. Another change that I would like to see is that for smaller producers, and maybe they have a limit on annual production or something, that they can be their own distributor.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. So that the brand rep is actually operating as a distributor. Now, they're not going to invest in infrastructure to have, trucks all over the state of Texas and all of this stuff to ship everywhere, but they would at least be able to go out and market their product to local retailers and develop some brand awareness in a market before they had to go out and beg a distributor to take them on.
Right. And we know specifically of several, very small distilleries where there's, 2 employees or something. Right. And, some of these guys, you talk to them and they say, I don't even want to deal with the hassle. I'm doing this because I love it. I'm doing this because I wanted to make, this whiskey or, other spirits and we're fine where we're at. And sure, in theory, I'd love to grow, but I don't want to deal with everything that's involved in that, right?
Right.
We're going to stay incredibly small, and this is some of the guys like Banner out near us here. Banner Distilling, they make a wheat whiskey and some vodka and a few other things, but it's a very, very, very small operation, and they're doing it because they love it, and it's in their spare time. They have other jobs besides like the distillery, right? So they look at this kind of environment and think, yeah, I don't want to grow.
So the reason why these changes have not happened is because there's all of these competing interests, right? So you've got the distributor and the retailer fighting every recommended change. And from a business perspective, as a business owner, here's what I would like to propose to the consuming public, which is, and also to distributors and retailers and on-premise for that matter, if we made these changes, yes, you would lose your monopoly as a distributor, right? And you would lose your monopoly as a retailer.
Right.
However, there'd be some benefits that I don't think that people have considered, which is right now you have more people demanding your time than you have time for.
Mm-hmm.
You've made commitments to people that you cannot keep, right? Because you just don't have enough staff. You can't sell the product the way that you're supposed to because there's no more shelf space. There's no place to put it, right? You're trying so hard that you've turned the bottle sideways, so now it's pointless. Nobody's even seeing the product, right? So what would the environment be like if we allowed direct-to-consumer sales from these producers and we allowed the brands to build their own customer base with their own money the way that it was intended in the United States, where you had the freedom to start and grow your own business, right? Because the gun industry isn't even as regulated as spirits producers in the States.
Right, exactly.
You got to understand, if you make guns, you can ship your guns to consumers that buy them online. You cannot do that in the state of Texas if you make spirits. Right? There is an FFL involved, but regardless, you can still get it done, right? So if we remove these restrictions, allow people to market their own product, develop their own relationships with retailers, develop their own customer base, bottle sales clubs, all that stuff, then as a distributor, you wouldn't have to pick the winners and losers, right? You would only take on the winners. So instead of having 1,000 products when you only have capacity for 100, you only take on the 100 winners that already have customers out there, and you just make twice as much money with half the effort.
Yeah, they've already done the work for you.
Already done the work. We built the brand, right? There's already buzz. Now, as a liquor store owner, you don't have to have 1,000 brand reps coming into your store saying, please, please give me a little shelf space. Please, I just want to. That goes away, right? You're only carrying the products that are already the winners. So when your customers come in, you've got all winning products up there. And the losers, the people that aren't producing good whiskey, that's up to them to figure that shit out.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Because right now we're asking the distributor and the retailer to pick the winners and losers in the spirits industry instead of it being based on the quality of the product, which is typically how brands grow, and their business acumen. Because we take all of that out of the equation.
Well, and as a consumer, you have, your point earlier, those distributors aren't tasting what they're sending to liquor stores. The distributor, the distilleries are the ones that are tasting it. The reps are the ones that can tell you the flavor profiles. As a consumer, if you're spending 40, 50, 60, $80, $90 on a bottle, I want to know what the hell it tastes like. Because, I just, if I'm going to spend that much money, I want to be able to taste it. And yeah, you can go to tastings at Total Wine and things like that. That's great, fine, and wonderful. But again, that's a rep from the distillery that's being paid by the distillery to go out and do those tastings for 3-4 hours at a time. And we've done some, and they're okay. It's, you get some people that are not very nice when you do a tasting.
Once in a while.
So it's
the marketing being done by the brand itself, right? And building that buzz around their brand and getting to see it grow and building that success. All of a sudden, wouldn't you think that the distributors, just like, as you said, distributing the winning product into the retail stores and into the on-premise places, and all they're doing is serving the function that you would think they're intended to serve, and
they're distributing
their job is
product,
easier. Everybody knows about the product. There's passion behind it, and it seems like everybody wins in that scenario.
Yeah.
I completely
and we
agree.
do all the work. Like the distilleries do all the work, and they pay the people to market it.
Right. No, I think that's the way out, and I think eventually those things will change. But I don't know how long it's going to take. Unless you got something else, I think it's time to wrap it up.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you for having us on.
I mean, I'm so much more sort of well-versed in the production and the appreciation and how to engage people and talk about spirits. So, I was familiar with a lot of the things we were talking about today, but I learned a few things that I didn't know with regards to just the legalities and how the business works and all of those things. So thanks for not only having us on, but we got to learn a little bit about the other side of the whiskey world.
And thank you for telling the truth about Texas whiskey.
Yes.
It's a story that needs to be told. It's a passion that's out there that needs to be shared. And so,
and speaking of acquired taste, I'm going to go ahead and
go
a little bit of the brimstone to finish up here.
The palate wrecker. Yeah. So
Harbinger XC today. So
how do people get more information about you guys if they're interested?
So at the moment, it's Texas Whiskey Life is on Facebook and also Texas Whiskey Life on Instagram. We should fairly soon have a website up. It's texaswhiskey.life. You can also email us. It's Josh or Gretchen at texaswhiskey.life. So yeah, we'll be out there and have some cool stuff go. We got some merch ideas of our own. So
nice
glasses and things. So.
And we're talking about doing some YouTube content. I actually have a show that I do once a month with some other whiskey ladies called Whiskey and Lipstick International. We do it with I Whiskey She Wines. And so that's a fun show. We just had Marsha Licorice on Monday. And so that's just a fun show. And it's just a hobby for me right now. And so we'll broadcast that out on our social media platforms. We don't have a set schedule because it's just kind of a fun passion project, but
also totally go everywhere in Austin and order Iron Root wherever you see it.
Order Iron Root if you see us there. Also, if you follow us on Texas Whiskey Life, we'll let you guys know where we're going to be at. We've got 6 brand new accounts. They're going to keep Josh and I very busy. In the next couple weeks, we got a lot of bars and restaurants that we're going to start hosting events at. We have a wine tasting next week, so just find us there and come drink some Iron Root.
Yeah. And if you're in Austin and you go to a bar and they don't have Iron Root, try to order it anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Exactly.
And then message us and let us know, and then we'll go.
That's what worked for us at $7,000. We kept walking in and going like, "Hey, can I get a pour of the Iron Root?" Oh wait, I can't.
There you go. Well, and if you want more information about Bourbon Real Talk, you can find us on Facebook at Facebook.com/Bourbon Real Talk, on Instagram /Bourbon Real Talk. You can find us on our website at bourbonrealtalk.com, where you can submit show ideas. You can submit a request to become a show guest. You can reach out to me. My email address and everything is on there. And so we are just here to try and have some fun, share some whiskey knowledge, make the world a better place. And if you had any doubts when you woke up today whether or not somebody loved you, just know that I love you. And I'll see you next time on Bourbon Real Talk.